Okay, here it goes. We're going to put into the worksheet. This is the correct worksheet, but it's incorrect, which is really fun because this is what I put out as being the correct worksheet, and it's wrong. Okay, we're going to fix it up, and as we do so, we'll see how to do these worksheets a little bit as a review. Okay, the first thing we are concerning ourselves with is the fact that we've got some adjustments to make, and one of the ways to do this is, and by the way, I'm not going to go through the ASIDE entries because that you can look in the textbook. I'm just going to go through the concepts of where the numbers come from so that you can get an idea of what you're doing. One of the things we're going to find is that these things are on the wrong side, although they work with the Excel spreadsheet. Let's also try, I'll point it out as we go, but let's try not to laugh at the professor. It's a good thing this doggone student evaluations are over with, because it would have probably gotten worse than it is already. Not that I know what it is. I have no idea. Your grades will not be based on that. All right. So here's the way I approach finding what to do here. What I do first, or what I did do, is I took the net income per the subsidiary as it shows on its books. Then I started adjusting it by the adjustments that I know from the analysis we did in the previous tape, which is, number one, you have to, and the more, it's easy, but it's the more difficult one to conceptualize the first time through, is that the inventory was undervalued by 1, so they paid 1,000 or 10,000, whatever it is, in the thousands. They paid, using the numbers here, they paid 1 more than it is on the books of the sub. So if the inventory was, the beginning inventory was 1 more than it was on the books of the sub, let's think what that means. What does it mean? Okay, so if your beginning inventory, BI, is plus 1, then when you add your purchases and subtract the ending inventory, let's see what that means. So there'll be X, and what does that mean in terms of cost of goods sold? So if really the inventory should have been higher in the beginning by 1, then it means the cost of goods sold would be higher by 1 at the end of the day. So if the cost of goods sold is higher by 1, in my worksheet what I have to do is increase the cost of goods sold by 1, which is effectively what I've done here in the wild way of showing it as at a -1, but that's because all the expenses are shown negative. And it works with the formula. If you take the 105 cost of goods sold and the 35, here you do it, I'm doing a calculator, 35 plus the 1, the cost of goods sold comes out to the 141 over here, and that's exactly right. Well, it is right. Okay, so that's what that 1 is about, is increasing the cost of goods sold, because the parent paid 1 more, 1 being the digit, for the cost of goods sold than included in Sampson's books here. All right, let's move a little further. That's one adjustment. So we got adjustment 1 down, which is that. All right, the second and third adjustments are with depreciation and amortization. Depreciation for the equipment, we're told the equipment was undervalued by 4, so 4 over 4 years turns also out to be 1, and that's the 1 included in this number here. How did we get to that? Well, also this should be probably on this side, the debit, if you were doing the entries correctly in the right column, but the upshot is my debits and my numbers all the way to the consolidated side here work out okay, so that's not that big a deal. How did I get to 1.125? Is that the additional amount that we have to amortize is for the 40 put towards the 40 years, I should say, put towards the intangible, which is 5. So 5 over 40 gives me 1.25 per year, and so when I add that to the 1 per year for the equipment, I get 1.125. Those are additional expenses that have to be adjusted for in the elimination entries. All right, that's cool so far, I think. All right, so that gets me to the fact that I've now got the following calculation that I do. Again, I start from here, the net income, I make the adjustments, -1 for the inventory, minus 1.125 for the depreciation and amortization, and I'm going to get 12.875. If you don't believe me, then you should check my math, because I might be wrong. No, but it's 12. 2.875. Now, take 80% of this, take 20% of this, 20% for the non-controlling interest, 80% for the controlling interest. 12.875 times 0.8 gets me 10.3. Voila! That's the number. That proves that. Yay. So now we know that the equity method was done correctly the first year, and we also know something else, because 0.2, meaning the non-controlling interest of this number, turns out to be not this, but, so that's wrong, but it turns out to be 2.575. So that should be the correct number. And I'll sort of correct this as we go along just a little bit. Okay, a lot of numbers going around there. Maybe I just did some math wrong, but I had everything else right. Doesn't that count for something? Can I get credit for that? Well, we'll think about it. So at any rate, this should be 2.575, and that would mean that this would then be 30.3, and that's what you really want to see. Let me make these numbers, well, you can see it, 30.3, because that agrees with this. Remember, if the equity method is used, which it was here in 2011, that's what we're looking at the first year, 2011. So the result is that these two numbers agree, and that's what should happen. So let's see it again by getting the slate clean. 30.1 was incorrect over here. That's my answer. Should have been that. If I had done this correctly, it would have turned out perfectly. That's the income statement side, and what do we have after we've done all that? Well, we get the following. We now know the amount of income that belongs in the consolidated statement to the parent. We now know the amount of the income that belongs to the non-controlling interest, which is supposed to be 2.575, not that number. We know that. And then the total consolidated, if we needed to know it, would be the 30 point, and by the way, that should be 30.3. That's what we've learned so far. It should be 30.3. And so now we know that the total amount of the consolidated income, if I were to ask you that question, would be 30.3 plus the 2.575, and it would be 12.875 plus 30.3 over here. That's what it should turn out to be. I'm sorry, not 30.3 over there, but the amount of the income from the parent after you take out this. So let's see what that is. Let's prove that. Let me say that again, because first let me prove it to myself, and then I'll say it. I'll show you what I'm doing. Well, let me show you what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out what's the income from the parent. So they got 160 minus their cost of goods sold, 105, minus other expenses, 35, and what does that get you? So do the math. 160 minus 105 minus 35, and that's 20. So now let's adjust it for the amount of the income from the sub, which is part of the equity method. And what number was that? That was 10.3. So let's do that. So we got 20 here, put 10.3, and you get 30.3. All right, so what does that prove? I don't know what it proves, but let's keep on going because it's got to prove something somewhere. Okay, so if we know that the total amount of income after adjustments from the subsidiary is supposed to be 12.875, and we think that of that 2.575 belongs to the non-controlling interest, and the difference, which would be, let's see, 12.875 minus 2.575, 10.3 belongs to the parent. Then we take the 12.875 is the total consolidated income between the two companies. So for the subsidiary, so let's see, what am I trying to do? And what I'm trying to do is the following. I'm trying to just do a reconciliation. So if over here the income from the parent without the equity method was 20, so what we should be able to do over here is to figure out the total consolidated income, now that we know that this represents the income from the subsidiary after our adjustments. And so we're going to add to this 20, and we're going to get 32.875. So let's reconcile that to what we found over here, which is the breakdown between non-controlling interest and the controlling interest plus the 20. Do we wind up getting the same thing? I think we do. I'm not sure I really reconciled it, but I've sort of proven it over and over again that it comes out to this number as the total consolidated income for everybody, and then the breakdown between the non-controlling interest and the controlling interest should simply be 20 for the parent plus the non-controlling interest here, gets you 30.3. I mean the controlling interest of the subsidiary, and this is the non-controlling interest. I think I just said the same thing 5 times. Okay, let's move on to the balance sheet and see what happens there. What happens here is we're we're eliminating the opening retained earnings. That's always what we do. So we did that. That's correct. We eliminated the income from the non-controlling interest up here. So that's already been done. Where has that been done? That's already been done up here. That's part of our adjustments. We have taken care of the dividends by showing the dividends to be 10 net, and 1 belongs to the non-controlling interest because it's 20% of the 5 in total. So far, so good. I'm just doing my methodology of what's logical, what we know has to be done. Beginning, when you do any year, the part of the A entry, I said I wouldn't do them, but the A entry has to be the opening retained earnings. That's the S entry, I'm sorry. The S entry has to be the opening retained earnings, which it is here. I showed you that already. And the A entry has to be the opening balance for the year of the assets. So it's 4, because that's the difference. This is the first year, and the patent's 5. So those are done right. Then we take away the depreciation in this case, the amortization in this case. That'll leave us with the numbers for the balance sheet over on this side when we do the math. There's no goodwill that was determined, and everything now should work out pretty well. The investment we know has to be zeroed out, so that would be part of your A and S entry, and that's how you'll know if you got to 0. You don't do anything down here except for these 2 accounts, capital stock and additional paid in capital, because all of the retained earnings is calculated through this part of the worksheet. All right, that says it all. You do the math, you come up with it. How do you know what the ending non-controlling interest is for down here? That's a good question. And since it's the first year, we can do it the following way. Well, we started off where they bought for 100, which represented the implied value after paying 80. So the implied value of the non-controlling interest started out to be 20. So if you take 20 as the beginning non-controlling interest, you add in the income for the year, which is 2.575. You take out the dividend. Again, this is all that belongs to the non-controlling interest. You will wind up with 21.575. So my math must have been wrong someplace along the way, and it really should have balanced it at this number. That's the ending non-controlling interest. And we'll see more about that when we go to do the next year, which we're going to do next.